So, all right, well, welcome everybody to the second panel discussion in our Mosaic for Earth series. We're very glad to have you here tonight. So, I'm Annie Pierce. I'm hosting your panel tonight, and I wanted to offer our thanks to Blacksburg United Methodist Church for hosting this event and also streaming. The event is being streamed live on YouTube, and it will also be available via recording for people who would like to look at it later. I also want to offer thanks to Blacksburg Master Chorale for being a co-sponsor of the event, and the Virginia Tech BioBuild program, who is the sponsor of the outreach for the Mosaic for Earth performance series. And since I am mentioning Mosaic for Earth repeatedly, for those of you who may not be aware, Mosaic for Earth is a choral composition by Dwight Bigler, and you can see our title slide up there. Its premiere performance will be on April 3rd at the Moss Arts Center, and there's information at the door about the concert. We hope that you'll take that with you and consider joining us for that performance. It's at 7 p.m. at the Moss Arts Center, and there's a series of events. This is the second in a series of 4 that surround the concert. After the concert, so the concert's on April 3rd, following that on April 4th, there will be a reading by Eric Reese called Lost Mountain, that's sponsored by the English department. And then 2 weeks after that, a workshop on personal sustainability planning on April 16th from 1 to 3, and that will be via Zoom. And you can find information about all of these events at mosaicforearth.org. So we encourage you to have a look at that and take a look and see what you can find there. All right, so I'm pleased to introduce our panelists for this evening. So without further ado, let me introduce the folks to you who will be telling us about how they have changed the world and giving us some tips on how we can go about doing that as well. So from your left to right, first of all, we have Joe Fortier, who I asked them all to provide a couple of keywords to describe how they think of themselves. So I'll start with those. Joe describes himself as a local entrepreneur, a business owner, and an agent of change. He's the founder of Acme Panel Company, which makes next-generation building envelopes that are healthier, stronger, more resilient, and that dramatically reduce your carbon footprint. He's also the founder of Taylor Hollow Construction, which restores vacant Main Street buildings in the New River Valley and puts them back into productive use. And lastly, he's the treasurer and a founding board member of Live, Work, Eat, Grow, which sponsors a shared-use kitchen for farmers, starting businesses, and local community gardens. Our second panelist, Lynn Brammer, when I asked her to provide some words, she said that she's living the dream and giving back to the community in every way I can. And I love this quote that she provided. She said, "The first served by the service is the server." So Lynn grew up in the New River Valley and has never left. She is retired from the Virginia Maryland College of Veterinary Medicine, and she is involved in just a wonderful variety of things. She's a master gardener with the New River Valley Master Gardeners Association. She is the founder of Share the Spare at the Blacksburg and Christiansburg Farmers Market, and she's a member of the NRV Glean team, and she's also a board member of the NAACP. Luke Stengel describes himself as a bioproduct entrepreneur and a visionary pioneer in many fields of human endeavor, from learning to understand the human psyche to practical solutions to the world's most pressing problems of resource conservation and environmental preservation. So he's here tonight as the CEO of Pragmatic Environmental Solutions Company, or PESCO, and he's also the founder of Anahata Biocommunity and Education Center. He's a co-founder and member of the board of directors of Blue Mountain School and vice president of Sustain Floyd. And then last but certainly not least, we have Rhonda Seltz, who describes herself as a healthcare advocate, community organizer, convener, connector, and outreach educator. And Rhonda also grew up in the NRV. She is a certified navigator with Enrolled Virginia, that's a part of the Virginia Poverty Law Center. And as part of her work in that role, she's helped thousands gain access to healthcare and other resources. She's been honored as a child health champion for her efforts in increasing access to healthcare for children. And she's received statewide recognition for her creative outreach approaches and advocacy for better dental care access. She's active in civic engagement, and I love this. She is a loud and constant voice for Southwest Virginia on regional, state, and federal levels, who has motivated and inspired hundreds of students to be part of the social justice movement. So please join me in welcoming our panelists tonight. All right, now with that, I will invite our first panelist to come up and tell us briefly how he has changed the world.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I must confess that I grew up Catholic, and standing up here giving this presentation in a church is very intimidating for me. So if I stumble through it a little bit, we're used to sitting out there and not standing up here. The prompt we were given is, how have I changed the world? The short answer is not nearly as much as I hope to before I leave this mortal coil. I came to the New River Valley with my wonderful wife, Shelley Fortier, who used to be the director for Habitat for Humanity 22 years ago in the year 2000. I was a newly minted master's recipient from the University of California at Berkeley through the Energy and Resource Program, which is a fabulous program where I had been studying sustainability and global warming. I came to Virginia all jacked up to try to create global change, to educate people to change behavior. Started a nonprofit called One Life, One Planet, and it failed miserably. Back in 2000 in Blacksburg, Virginia, nobody cared. I remember going and talking to people at Tech, and back then their idea of sustainability was, and I quote, clean coal. A lot has changed for the better since then, but so here I was with all this energy and all this determination and nowhere to go. So this is where I invented Joe's rule number one of sustainability. Do what you can where you are with what you have. From my background before, when I was a younger man, I'm a pretty good businessman. I'm really good, and I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. And so I have, to this day, 22 years fast forward, created companies and practicing sustainability through business. We started with a small project in Radford, and I don't know how many people are longtime residents of the New River Valley. It was a vacant building on Main Street that we then renovated into 3 apartments, and it was the first coffee shop in downtown Radford. They didn't have any coffee shops back then. It was called the Coffee Mill. It served excellent coffee, and it was there for 12 years. But it was an example. When we were here in 2000, all of the buildings were vacant and deteriorating in Blacksburg, with the exception for a few small businesses. And this broke my heart. My grandfather had a Main Street business where he sold on Main Street, and he and my grandmother lived upstairs. My father was born in it, and to see these towns going vacant just broke my heart. So we started with that. We worked through a construction company. It was a certified historic renovation, and I didn't like the way they did it. So we started our own development company, and since then have created several companies that have a positive impact on the community. And we define that as, is it good for the community? Is it good for the employees? Is it good for the client? And is it good for the planet? So Annie has told you about our companies, a little bit about our companies. Agni Panel makes an insulated building envelope that dramatically reduces the amount of energy that's needed to heat and cool it, is safer, stronger, and healthier, and saves hundreds of thousands of pounds of carbon emissions per building. I know some of you are in the building program in Annie's classes. You need to understand that designing and building a very efficient building is a radically environmental and sustainable act. And then Taylor Hollow Construction, we take old buildings that are sitting vacant on main streets and we fix them up. We give them new life, we make them energy efficient, we make them into low to moderate income housing for working class people, and then we work with Main Street businesses to get new businesses started up that vitalize Main Street and create jobs. So for me, business offers the opportunity to express higher values of community and sustainability and create engines that can make the world a better place. Okay? And those of you who are studying economics, I have a very provocative phrase that I might drop on you at some point, but your economics teachers have lied to you. Economics was never meant to be a governing value. It was meant to be a way to allocate goods, and we have fallen prey to it. Business needs to become a higher calling, not a lower calling. Let's talk about our body of work. So we put in several large solar systems. Our panel factory in Radford, Virginia is a reclaimed brownfield project that sat abandoned for about 15 years that we did a tremendous amount of environmental remediation for. We put in a deep energy retrofit to make it very energy efficient, and then we put 360 solar panels on the roof. So we're trying to walk the walk. We've also put in 2 other solar systems, and just recently I have discovered a way of making solar systems very economic on historic buildings. So heretofore, every historic renovation we'll have solar on the roof, just as a matter of principle. We've done development projects that have saved or repurposed 13 buildings on main streets throughout the New River Valley. We have created 75 units of housing that are energy efficient for working class people at very reasonable rates. We've helped rejuvenate downtowns. We have shipped over 500 buildings out across America and to as far as Australia that have resulted in reducing carbon emissions by over 10 million pounds a year and counting. And we have worked really hard to lower our environmental impact in all phases of our personal and professional operations. So we can go into some of those things, but those include solar, those include, the cars we drive are hybrids, the buildings we build are very energy efficient, earthcraft or better. We plant trees where we can. We've got a $30,000 machine that takes the waste product from our panels and densifies it down into a byproduct that then is sent out to make surfboards. So our buildings have remarkably less waste in them than the normal one. We provide a living wage for 30 employees, and then we do a lot of work through the nonprofit Live, Work, Eat, Grow. Annie, I think that's my time. Are we good? I've got a few other things here. Okay. We'll leave it for now. Thank you.
Well, I must say, I didn't prepare as many comments for the opening part. I'll get busy later on when we're doing the panel discussion. But the question that we were posed in the beginning is, how have you changed the world? And I really feel like, how has the world changed me? I mean, how can you not observe what's going on around you and feel impacted about it and wonder what you could do in your little part? So I grew up on a farm. Actually, it's out near where the Radford Hospital is. That next door property was our family farm. We had 3 gardens going all the time. I grew up hating gardening. When I was in college at Tech, then I finally dipped my toe back in it, and things weren't going well. I didn't have success, and I wasn't interested. But then I learned the importance of soil and took the Master Gardener program. And the beauty of taking the program here is, forgive the pun, but we have the cream of the crop professors that teach us botany, soils, propagation, fruit trees. We are so fortunate in that area for the program that I took. This is offered through cooperative extension with Land Grant University. So you sign up to take the Master Gardener program, or there's a Master Naturalist, there's a nutrition program, but the deal is they train you, then they put you on the street. They want you to share your knowledge. They want you to do something to impact the community. So back in 2010 is when I had shopped at Blacksburg Farmers Market on a Saturday. Everybody loves the scene if you've ever been there once. There's music, there's friendships and conversations. It's just a beautiful scene. And it certainly occurred to me how fortunate we are to have a farmer's market and to also be able to shop a farmer's market. Some of my friends that came out for the first time said, I can't afford this, and they went back and they never visited again. What they didn't take into consideration is this food is local, this food has far fewer pesticides or potentially often organic, this food didn't have to travel by 18-wheeler, and it's seasonal. We get so used to seeing that perfect piece of fruit in the grocery store or vegetable, and we don't realize how much produce is grown locally, and these farmers, this is their livelihood. So it's impacted me by just observing and seeing what's going on. I formed networks and relationships with people just by attending the farmers market, and then I'll delve more into the story about our origins, but that's the background on how this became something. Yeah, well, they're kind of self-explanatory. Collecting for grown fresh produce to distribute to those in our communities who otherwise may not have access to healthy options. Obviously, you all can read too, but and then the sources. What we found since we started, what we hoped is that people that shop the market would just buy one extra zucchini, would buy one extra bag of greens and put it in our basket, with knowing that we were going to get it on tables. And now we've expanded to accept people's backyard garden surplus. I was mentioning earlier, when your zucchini come in and your neighbors pull down their shades because they don't want any more zucchini, we'll take them. Vendors donate. That is the biggest donation we have. These farmers that are set up at the market bring over boxes and boxes of beautiful, beautiful produce at the end of the market. So I just feel so lucky to be the one that passes that on. And I never wanted to do money, but a friend would come by and she'd say, here's $5, I can't stay, I've got to be on my way. So when I would take it to one of the farmers, they'd give me twice at least. So I put out a tip jar, and now people are so generous because they know I've been spreading the word that vendors indeed, when they hear it is for our basket, they often give 2 or 3 times what the value is of that monetary donation. We also have several groups called Junior Master Gardeners. They're so cute, and Market Kids. To see a kid grow asparagus first time, and they think asparagus is just horrible, but they taste what asparagus is truly supposed to taste like. The same thing with the fresh tomato. So to see kids be proud of what they've grown, and then they bring it down and bring the excess to us. Talk about a moment. It's just beautiful to see how they're turned on to gardening and how they also realize the importance of sharing their extras. So that's what those relate to. Is that it? Back there? Yep. And now they're also local green teams. I'm so proud of them. John Galbraith, who's a soil scientist on Tech's campus, he's one of the leaders of this group. It first started out that they were just harvesting local fruit trees, or there's a turnip man in Reiner that would offer a field of turnips for us to come pick. We would be glad to. But now what the Glean team is finding garden space. They're out at the community garden, at Livy Corporate. They're also at the Turfgrass Research Center planting a little garden. They have researched what vegetables have the highest nutritional value and the longest shelf life, so that these are items that they can pass on through the winter months. We also give out recipes. When someone doesn't know what to do with a butternut squash, we can tell them what they should do with a butternut squash. Do they want savory or do they want sweet? So it's educating people to be pleased to get the produce that are donated in this area. And it's a beautiful relationship. I've learned so much along the way.
So that question, how that changed the world, I actually don't know. But I actually started looking into and demonstrating renewable energy sources in 1972. Specifically, I was out on Long Island for a couple of years, and while I was out there, there was this amazing business called Long Island Duckling, and they, it was one of those amazing, just strange things from my perspective. When I went out to see them, there were all these concrete duck houses that were being heated by nuclear generated electricity, and then just outside of the duck houses were these gigantic piles of duck manure and hay, and they were growing corn for the ducks in that area. This is all on the sandbar, by the way, so stuff is always kind of running off and running into the ocean, and they were doing it with chemical fertilizers. And I, had developed and researched anaerobic digestion, which is otherwise known as a methane digester. And I told them that they could take all that hay and duck manure. Oh, and just one other thing was that when I went there, you could see they were right on the water, and you could see green foam pretty much as far as you could see, which was, of course, all that heavy nutrient just leaching into the sandbar. Anyway, so what I did was I immediately built a small methane digester, which was portable, and I would take it around to different places, including them and universities and stuff, and actually perk coffee with the methane gas. And students would come and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, are you selling coffee?" I said, no, I'm giving it away. And they said, "Oh, really? Oh, can I have some?" I said, "Yeah, but you have to stay for the lecture." And then they agreed to that. And when the coffee was perked, I handed it to them all. And then I talked to them about anaerobic digestion of organic waste and the fertilizer value and left afterwards and so on. And that we should be doing that with all our waste. All the human waste, all the animal waste should be going through anaerobic digesters, because it generates huge amounts of methane gas and fertilizer. I mean, come on. So anyway, that was just how I got into it. Since then, I've been, what happened was there was 2 oil shocks in a row, pretty much one in 71, one in 79, and people started calling me and saying, "Hey, you always talk about renewable fuel. What can you do about, liquid fuels?" And so I did a little bit of research here at Virginia Polytechnic Institute. I had a good friend who was a professor, and together, we just came up with this plan of community-scale alcohol fuel plants. The idea being that we could have local fuel-producing facilities that also produce either feed or fertilizer as a byproduct that could produce the liquid fuel that's needed to run the various, to run the community. And of course, the interesting thing that most people don't know is that whenever you use biomass to create an alternative, a renewable fuel, you are actually, even though it emits carbon dioxide, when you're burning it, it actually emits much less than the plant absorbed during its life cycle. So you're actually staying in a carbon negative economy by doing that, and most people don't have any idea. The other thing that most people don't know is that ethanol is actually much better a fuel for any internal combustion engine than is gasoline, because of a whole bunch of reasons, but the main reason is that it actually has 1.5 times the what's called the mechanical efficiency, and so it pushes the vehicle with much more power at much lower temperatures, and then of course that helps the vehicle last a whole bunch longer. But again, most people have no idea about this because there's been a huge amount of anti-renewables propaganda and so on by our wonderful major oil companies. But anyway, other ways that I've probably had some impact on how the world goes, I created a school in 1981 because both of my boys were having difficulty in public school. And I realized that we actually needed to figure out how to educate kids in a way that was really useful rather than what we tend to do. And so I created this school called Blue Mountain School, which is roaringly successful at this point in Floyd County. We started out with 12 kids, and we're now at 60. And what we do is we try and teach kids several things that I think are really important. One of them is they become project-oriented so that they can actually see how their learning can be implemented in a useful way and learn a lot about, they can learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and all that stuff as a byproduct of creating something. That's one thing. The other thing is they're learning conflict resolution. I think that's hugely important in today's world. And they're also learning mindfulness, which is how to become aware of self, which is, of course, a very important thing in today's world also. Anyway, at a certain point, I did indeed get involved in building ethanol plants in Floyd County, using mostly industrial starch and sugar waste to produce it and then selling it into the gasoline mix as a mix called gasohol, mostly before most of you were born, I'm sure. And then when the price of crude came crashing down in the late 80s, I actually retrofitted the plants we had to recycle things like antifreeze and various types of industrial solvents that were being, at that point, incinerated and burned and thrown away. And I realized you've got to conserve some of these very valuable resources, and you can easily do it with off-the-shelf technology. You can actually recover all the different materials that are used in manufacturing, which, by the way, almost every manufacturing process has various types of solvent waste streams and oil waste streams. And they can all be recovered at pretty much virgin level and put back into the same process. And we should absolutely be doing that. So I started a company about 35 years ago or so, which oriented itself specifically to developing technologies to do that. And the most abundant one that we found that is now, we have plants all over the world, take used motor oil as you drain it out of an automobile and recover it back into a virgin lubricant. And that's kind of, we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later, I don't know. Okay, so there's some slides. We created a company in Costa Rica which basically we collect motor oil from huge fleets and lots of different places, and we take it to, we actually until now have been bringing it to the United States, re-refining it, sending it back as a finished product to the same people, so it's a complete loop. And now we just got funded to build a plant in Costa Rica where we can just bring the stuff from them, re-refine it, blend it back into a finished product, and then return it to them, which is a total loop, in other words. And so that's something we've been doing for quite a while. That's how, so currently lube oil is basically kind of what we call a linear economy, where it comes from the, from the extraction from the oil wells, goes into a refinery, then it's transported to the shops that sell it, the consumer uses it, and then it's usually disposed of in a variety of fairly bad ways. And what we're doing now is we're creating technology, and have been actually doing it for now 20 years or so, which takes the lube oil all the way back into a finished product. And you can see how it's a complete loop. Over on the top right, we collect the oil, we bring it to a re-refinery, which takes it all the way back into what's called a base lube. Then we blend additives into it. All lube oil has additives in it, and we blend those back in, and then we sell it as a finished product, and usually to the same people that we collected it from. So that's basically it. I don't know if we have any more slides, but
Yeah, I mean, okay, and so you can see there that to produce half a gallon of virgin lube oil takes 42 gallons of petrochemical, crude oil. Whereas when you take, if you have a barrel which is 42 gallons of used oil, you recover 34 gallons of finished product. So it's infinitely more efficient. Huge amounts of carbon are saved by re-refining used oil as opposed to buying it new. So this is basically the company we created there, and it shows that we, every plant we've built saves a certain amount of carbon, and they have the numbers up there. But so many tons of carbon per plant that we have all over the world. We have them all over the world. We have them in Australia. We have them in Israel. We have them even in the Middle East. We have 3 plants in the Middle East, and and then quite a few in the United States. Any other slides? 'Cause I really don't know what was put here. Yeah, this is a picture of the largest plant we've built so far. It's in Columbus, Ohio, and it reprocesses 2,000 gallons an hour of waste lubricant and turns it back into finished product. And we have plants in the United States, Australia, Israel, Antigua, and so on. You can see the list there. Any other slides? Just in case. No? Okay, good. So that's it. So have I changed the world? I hope so.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm kind of the Oprah of the group here, but I have a lot of nervous energy, and I have to be walking around, and my brain doesn't work unless I walk around. But I'm Rhonda Seltz, and you better believe I've changed the stinking world. I have. And I'm so proud of it. And I've helped inspire other people to do the same thing. It's like I was born with this obligation to make an impact in people's lives and to make things fair, to make things just. And I felt like I had to be her. I'm the one. I'm not Jesus or anything. But I am motivated on every level to make change. And I remember moving to Yakima, Washington, and Yakima, Washington had the highest murder rate per capita. And it was a very, very scary place. I didn't answer my door unless I had a dog and a gun. And I just didn't get it as to why people would put up with that. I mean, I'm a mountain woman from southwestern Virginia, and there ain't no way that I would allow that in my community. And so I didn't even know what it was called. I was just one angry, red-headed woman knocking on doors. I don't know about you, but I ain't putting up with this, and I'm going to do something about it. So I went to Neighbors, did have a 38 on my hip, because it was a very dangerous place. There was a huge Army tank parked across the street from the house. Neighbors found bullets in their yards with flesh attached to it. So I started going door to door and started community meetings. We had a lot of Spanish-speaking folks. I could speak a little bit of Spanish, so I started a Spanish newsletter. I started an English newsletter. I hooked up with a church, a local church.
I hooked up with finally the police department when they would show up, and the schools joined in. The kids marched down to City Hall to demand to have their park reopened, and it had been taken over by drug addicts. I demanded to have our meetings outside in front of the crack houses, and people would say, "Oh my gosh, Rhonda, aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid that, they're going to do something to you?" And I said, they have a business to run. They're making money, and they can always move their business. But if they do something to me, there goes their money. And besides, they called me that crazy redheaded woman that packs a gun and is a little off in the head. And they were afraid that any of those evil spirits that I had in my crazy self would jump off into them. And we were able to make tremendous impact in that neighborhood. And as a result, Yakima, Washington was named All-American City by the President of the United States. And that started with one angry red-headed woman. You don't even have to have red hair. But it was then that I realized, I don't even like this stinking neighborhood. This ain't even my community. If I can do that there, just think what I could do with my own community. So I got my bachelor's degree, before at Tech, and my master's degree in community psych, which dealt a lot with program development and community organizing and grant writing. And then after spending 11 years in Washington, I moved back home to southwestern Virginia with my 8-year-old son in tow. And again, he is the most beautiful child you've ever seen, even though he's 30. And so I've definitely changed the world because he is the perfect dude. But when I came back here, community health was such a big draw for me. And I have been in health and human services for almost 40 years. And I have seen lots of suffering. I've seen a lot of injustice. I've seen a lot of poor people, minority people who suffer just because they are poor and minority. That's not okay. And I know that that has to change. And when you see that, when you're immersed in that on a regular basis, you begin to have that ability to speak for those people, because these people have no voice. They don't believe in politics and government, and they don't think anybody's going to come and rescue them. You got to be out there with the people. You got to make yourself uncomfortable. I put myself in a lot of uncomfortable situations because I wanted to experience it. And sometimes, right when you think that maybe things are not changing, that policies are not changing, they do. And the way that I've been able to change the world is through public policy, through public health policy, by being the voice of the very people and stakeholders that it affects. I've seen so much change just in the last 20 years in policy. And I've always wanted to kind of be, I've always wanted to be in a position where I could kind of have this bird's eye view of all the pieces of the puzzle and how they connect in the community. And I think I've got that now. because I know how to solve problems. I'm not real good at any one thing, but I tell you what, I know people who know stuff. And I know who to get at the table. So when there is an issue, when there is a problem, well, somebody ought to do something about this. Well, yes, somebody's going to, and so I, along with those other people who have that same kind of obligation, self-obligation, we're going to get the people at the stakeholders at the table. And we're going to start solving problems. Because God knows that there are no abundant, everlasting flow of resources. We've got to take care of ourselves, and that starts at the local level. And the New River Valley, oh, the New River Valley. What great resourceful people we have here. And I mean, we've been able to take the few resources that we have, and we've got so many experts. You know, we've got these universities and colleges. We have these incredible employers and people out there doing the hard work like these three people up there. But we got to get them at the table. We got to connect the puzzle pieces. And then we have to then put that in policy. So, I mean, I've taught so many students, and I tell them, man, I'm getting old and tired. It's your turn. It's your turn. You're the ones that are going to be changing the world through policy, through your everyday stinking actions, man. You can make a difference in people's lives just by acknowledging their existence. I don't know a stranger. I don't care if it's a homeless person talking to themselves. I'm going to go talk to them and ask them if they need resources. I've put myself out there a lot. But I'm telling you, it's the only way to do it. So if we're going to save this world, we got to do it together. We got to figure out where those resources are, get the right people at the table, and raise HE double hockey sticks. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, panelists. So the next portion of our panel is a series of round-robin questions. So I'm going to ask a question, and we'll ask each of the panelists to provide an answer, and y'all can just shout it out as you feel inspired, or we can go in nice organized fashion. We'll just see how this goes. All right, so the first question: how did you become aware of the need that your change addressed? And each of you has worked on a specific kind of need, some social, some environmental, some a blend of both. How did you become aware of those changes?
I mean, just existing and being and talking to people, and I mean, it doesn't even have to be in a work setting. I mean, open your eyes and see, just experience it.
Yeah, for me, what happened was just one particular example, which was I talked about, which was the Long Island duck farm, where there was this huge amount of biomass being created and then polluting the water instead of being converted into a fuel that would have powered everything they were doing and the village around them, and also being able to grow all the duck food with that particular resource, because it's so high in nutrients. And what I just noticed at that point was that we tend to be like that linear economy that I put up there, which is we take stuff in and we shove it out and we want it to go away. It's kind of like this like we're these tubes. And we can actually, when we pay attention, take the resources that we're not using and repurpose them, or basically put them back into the original shape that we're in, and thereby live a completely different kind of a life, and do it on a very local basis. We don't have to do it at the macro basis at all. So anyway, that's kind of what happened to me.
I would just attend the Blacksburg Farmers Market as a patron, just love the scene, as I mentioned earlier. There was a gentleman back in 2010, he's from Floyd, and his name was McCabe Coolidge. And he and his wife, Karen Day, started a group called Plenty. So he would show up at the Blacksburg Farmers Market with a potter's wheel, and he'd put these little chairs for children, and they would sit down and watch him make pots. Well, what I didn't really realize, that at the end of the market, farmers were taking over their surplus to him. So he was kind of doing what I was, not really what I was intended to do, was I was going to ask the patrons of the market there to shop if they would donate. He was collecting from the farmers at the end of the market. But I heard later that when he heard I was showing up and going to represent Master Gardeners and do my spiel, that he got a little bit worried, thinking, is she going to take my food? Is she going to replicate what I'm already doing? In no way was my intent to. In fact, you don't reinvent the wheel. Those first times on Saturdays when I was getting his produce, I took at least half of it over to him to deliver to Floyd. And he went, oh, is this how it's going to work? So suddenly he realized I was his ally and advocate, as opposed to any kind of competition. Thank you, any kind of competition. But just a little story that I thought was so sweet. His wife, what I love about Plenty and Floyd, that's what they're called, Plenty, they're a whole farm and have developed into just an amazing work. You should look it up. But when they first started, they acknowledged that some people don't have wheels to get to the pantry. They had no way. So Karen sent McCabe out with some produce 30 miles on the other side of Willis, and he drove and finally found the place, and it was a trailer, and it was had 3 cars on cinder blocks in it, and the grass was up to here. And McCabe said, oh my gosh, somebody needs to have some pride in their living habits. And Karen said, walk in there, sit on their couch. And sure enough, he came out an hour later a changed man. He realized it was a veteran that was post-traumatic stress syndrome. He had no vehicle. He couldn't even drive. All he lived for were people to come to his place and think of bringing some food and some fellowship. So Plenty and Floyd does the whole deal. They not only gather this food, grow this food, teach other people how to grow and gather this food, but they deliver it all over Floyd County to those that might not have ways of getting to this food. And to sit on their couch and learn their lives, I'm sure it made that man's day, and every week when he returned, it was something they both look forward to. So just relationships like that to develop, it inspires you to realize how many people are under the radar and struggling. So, and then often when Parents' Day and the parents come through the farmer's market with college students, they would say, so what are you doing? And then suddenly I would hear what they were doing back in Fairfax, or doing what they were, seeing what they were doing over in Norfolk that paralleled what we were doing. And I would learn from them and they would learn from us. So it's just about building relationships, and once again, not inventing the wheel. See who's doing the work you hope to do, and join forces and see how you can assist.
So I graduated from Dartmouth College in 1984, and did what people did back in the 80s, which is I went to work. I worked for 3 different Fortune 500 companies and had a very good career, made good money, was the youngest vice president of my firm, and it was all very hollow. Even though the companies were ethical and they provided good services, it just didn't mean anything to me. So at the age of 32, when we had my oldest son, I made the decision. My wife also had a very good career, and she seemed to like hers. So I stayed home to raise our kids, which back then was pretty radical. A lot of people wondered when I had gotten laid off and why I was doing this, what was wrong with me. And the fact is, there was nothing wrong with me. It gave me a lot of time to think. I read several books, which I would point you to. There's one called The Limits to Growth that was commissioned for the group of Rome by Dana Meadows and her husband and another gentleman. And then there has been a follow-up in that has been much more frequent, much more recent, called Beyond the Limits to Growth. And these are some very, very smart people, and they basically modeled the world in 7 different axes and came up to the conclusion that we're all headed for serious trouble. You can pick whether you believe if your issue is food security or water or poverty or war or global warming, and the math is fairly indisputable. That shook me to the core as a new father. This is not the world that I want to leave for my children. And so I actually reached out to Dr. Meadows, who was teaching at Dartmouth, and to my shame, I didn't do it as an undergraduate because I was unaware. But she had suggested a group over in Berkeley called the Energy and Resource Group, which was Dr. John Holdren, who was an advisor to one of the presidents, the energy advisor to the president. But they're pretty heavy into, okay, let's look at this and the energy impacts of everything we do, but also various aspects of water use and sustainability, and that really opened my eyes. And so I was very, very fortunate in that way. And then when I, came out, as I said, okay, how do we put this to work? Is the question. And that's the question that I would put that you all face as younger people who are going out into the world. How do I put this to work? So you are all agents of change about ready to start on your own journey. I suggest that you be brave and diligent and apply that to your own set of interests. And there are so many ways. Just look at this panel. You couldn't pick 4 different people in 4 different ways. There are thousands of ways for you to make a difference. Go do it.
Well, some of you have sort of answered this, but I bet you can come up with some things to add. So the next question is, what in your background or personality or your core self, what best prepared you to do what you've done?
A redhead's temper.
I was fixing my parents' clocks because I was born in Paraguay, out in the middle of nowhere, and they couldn't buy clocks. And so when a clock went bad, they would just put it on a shelf. And as a 7-year-old kid, I went, I bet I can figure it out. And so I just took the clock down, took it apart, and fixed it and gave it back to them. They were looking at me like I was some kind of a saint or something, but really it was all just a matter of sequences of years and things like that. And I realized at that point that I could really solve almost any problem if I applied myself to it.
Well, my answer is short. Humanity, what background prepared you? Just being a human being and observing and making relationships and hearing people's stories. If you're not paying attention, you're going to miss so much. So listen as much as you talk.
So I have this thing in me that is determined to look at the world and make it a better place and see what is, but see what can be, and ask why not. And Annie can vouch for this, I am stubborn because I believe. And then the other thing, which is a much more technical thing, is I'm really good with finances and business arrangements, which if you're going to be into sustainability, you actually have to be better than the people who are in the free market that don't care that you're competing with. You have to be better. So whatever your technical craft is, if you're a chemist, if you fix things, if you grow things, get better at it than the people who you're competing against. I'll call it competing, even though we're not competing. You have to be good at what you do.
Or make friends with people who are.
Or make friends with people who are.
All right. So sort of in parallel to that, what resources specifically were most helpful to you? You've all talked about making relationships with people or tapping into resources along the way. What did you find most helpful at various phases?
I think really is looking at, I mean, as far as community partnerships and looking at organizations and their missions and being willing to go outside of your job description to kind of help others, you know, kind of for the greater good versus, sorry, that's not in my job description. And, you know, the resources that the Virginia Healthcare Foundation has done incredible things for healthcare. Community Catalyst, Voices for Virginia's Children, the Virginia Poverty Law Center, New River Community Actions, the Head Start programs, the CHIP case management programs. There are just so many organizations and people at the local, regional, state, national levels that are fighting hard behind the scenes. And I think sometimes folks tend to think, well, why isn't somebody doing something? But we are. We are.
I guess so.
So, actually, it's interesting, when I embarked on my research into renewables, what really was useful to me was university libraries. And of course, most of my work and research in the early days was done before there was such a thing as the internet. There was no way you could just, you know, ask a question into a PDA and get a response. So it was a matter of really sleuthing, you know. I would come actually to Virginia Tech Library, and I would go to the librarians and say, hey, do you have any articles from, in this case it was about ethanol as a renewable fuel? And they'd say, you know, they'd have that one little way of microfishing or whatever and finding, oh yeah, there's 2 or 3, and I'd get the articles and I'd read them, and I'd look at the bibliography, and if the article was something I was interested in, I would go back to them and say, I want all these books, and they would give them to me. And I'd go back home and read them all and take them back and say, okay, what's new, or what else is going on, you know? So, and then I also befriended professors here at Tech. One of them was a guy called Dr. Wallace, and he was a professor of chemical engineering. Unfortunately, he died in a car accident, but he helped me enormously. And then eventually I ended up with being good friends with a gentleman called Dr. Glasser, who was head of wood science over here at Tech also. And we created a center together called the Bio-Based Materials Center. And that center did nothing but research how we could get a vast variety of products, including epoxies and films and all kinds of building materials and so on, out of waste wood. Originally, we started out by wanting to create renewable fuels, but we realized that from wood chips, you can create almost anything that you can create from hydrocarbons. And it's completely sustainable, completely renewable, and so on. And of course, people say, well, you don't want to deforest the world, and I agree 100%. But what you can do is you can grow what's called short rotation woody crops on marginal land, sustainably with legumes between them to fix nitrogen and all that, and then take that stuff, which is really just sunlight in material form, and convert it into almost any product you want. So we developed that here at Tech.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm trained by Cooperative Extension Master Gardeners and then have this program, but I was trying to think, I feel like we started this in 2010. Every year since 2010, we set up from May until September at the Blacksburg Farmers Market. Every year since 2010, we've gotten over a ton of produce, a ton. Sometimes I have to find who can take it. Interfaith Food Pantry has at times said, oh, we've got plenty. And so I take it over here. The latest group I'm finding out that is here locally is South Pulse Collective. I hope everybody learns about them. They're also called Future Economy Collective. And they've got a office over here behind Kent Square, and they have a stocked outdoor access to everyone refrigerator. If you don't know about it, please share with folks that might be served by this, but they keep a refrigerator that, to me, I've got a little mental goal of trying to think if we could put one of these in every community in the Newburgh Valley. And that's their goal as well. So when we find somebody remodeling their kitchen and they were gonna throw out that refrigerator or take it to the resort, sorry. We may say, if you would think of donating it to one of these groups that is trying to set up something like this. So I am learning something every year that I've set this up to do better and reach out more and network with others. So it's a constant learning process for me.
We've got a brand new one in Radford, right in front of Bazaar.
Wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful.
off West Main Street.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, brand new.
So I'm fortunate enough to have a wonderful wife who couldn't be here tonight, who has backed my play, which is not nothing when you're trying to start a business that's difficult and nobody's been there before. And so having the faith of those around you that you can depend on is a really important thing. Also, making it such that your foundation is that economics don't drive you to make bad decisions or go into careers or fields that you don't want to, but you can follow this if it's your passion. There's an excellent book called Your Money or Your Life that I suggest that every person in college read. And it talks about understanding the relationship between what you buy and how much time you have to spend working in things that you don't care about. It's a very short read, and I made both my kids read it, much to their chagrin. I was fortunate enough, so some of the resources is learning how to think about environmental problem solving. There's another book called Consider a Spherical Cow by Dr. John Hart, who is brilliant. It's a thick read, but it teaches you how to do back-of-the-envelope calculations to figure out carbon savings or environmental impacts. There's a lot of bad information out there, and being able to just do simple, common sense things to determine who's telling the truth, who's lying, what's important and what's not, has been very helpful for me, trying to figure out where to put my energy to have the greatest impact. So this is my piece.
Good stuff. And by the way, part of this effort with Mosaic for Earth is to be assembling resources. I ask all the panelists for their recommendations, and those are going to be going on the Mosaic for Earth website, along with the two that you just cited. So thank you for that.
You're not on my list.
Thank you for that. Check those coming soon. All right. So the next question. So what is the biggest challenge you faced, and how did you overcome it?
Mean people. Mean, nasty people. Who just obstruct and sabotage. How do I overcome it? I don't, but I sure think of horrible ways to take care of the problem.
I think for me, the biggest challenge, when I was in 1972 taking a portable methane generator and setting them up in a student union and pricking coffee for people, and then telling them about this way of treating organic waste where you can get gas and fertilizer from it, they thought I was stark raving mad. And what I realized, and it's interesting because it took, I think, 50 years or so before generally people started waking up to the fact that indeed we probably should be looking at renewables. We probably need to find other ways than sucking hydrocarbons and coal and then spewing them into the atmosphere if we want to survive.
Now, of course, there's the other perspective, which is that maybe we don't need to survive. Maybe we want to go back to unicellular organism and try it again, you know? I mean, that's another perspective. But, you know, in the meantime, what I found again and again was that, to me, it was obvious, but most people weren't interested. And that was one of my biggest challenges. And getting funding for the same reasons. I mean, investors, they're looking at this quarter's bottom line, and I tried to get them to think 50 years ahead. Can you imagine?
My challenges sound so silly. What to do with greens until I can get them to the pantry? But seriously, on some Saturdays, our two vehicles, we are packed to the brim with produce, and we're looking immediately. In fact, that's why South Paul's, that used to have a location just down the street, they were my lifeline last year, and now they've moved just a little bit further away. But also, Aaron from Fairlawn Daily Bread and Meals on Wheels just showed up one day, and Aaron said, "Can I help you take some of this produce somewhere?" And suddenly Aaron was a resource there on a Saturday, just out of the blue, offering if he could help me carry it to my car. And then in our conversation, we found out what he was doing in Radford, and I said, "Take these greens, please." And so, once again, forming relationships, finding out what other people doing, and using their resources to combine with mine.
So the hard part about building a business from scratch is you've got to be an expert in every single darn thing. I was going to swear harder than that, but you know, and it's hard because to have good people, you have to have good policies, and to have, you know, good policies, you've got to think like an HR person. And, you know, to get the financing of the project, you've got to think like a finance person, and to think, to make the stuff, you've got to think like a manufacturing person. And so, you know, that is difficult. And then just so finding people to talk to that can help you through those things, or, you know, sometimes you just have to take your best guess, but there's a lot of help on the internet, and there's a lot of research to be had. Getting good people is critical. It's also difficult in the River Valley, and you have to be an opportunist. You might find someone who's not exactly what you want, but boy, they have this over here in spades, and then you have to find a way to work them into your operation. You also have to hire people when you're not hiring, when someone comes into your office that is going to be what you need. And so that's tricky on a small scale. Also, most buildings are not built very well. Most people who buy them and occupy them don't know that, and most builders don't care. And so there's nothing worse, and I've done this several times in my life, than starting a business that's highly relevant, but getting there 10 years too early. You know, the good news for us now is that our business has become highly relevant, and we've, to some extent as a country, pulled our head out of the sand and stopped denying that we have an issue with climate change, and started recognizing that it's the greatest single problem that we have. I mean, there are issues, yes, with poverty. There are issues, yes, with feeding people. But the one that if we don't deal with it, that is just going to overwhelm all of these and make them all worse, is climate change. We're almost at the point where, as adults, we're willing to say that and recognize the hard things that come with it that we're going to have to do. Almost. There's a lot of deniers, and then there's a lot of money in you know, every day that we don't take serious action against climate change is a day where billions of dollars are printed for certain industries and certain individuals. And so when you see a lot of the arguments against climate change, just think of them that way. You know, if you hear someone say, well, the science isn't determined yet, well, it is. You know, but if they get a day out of that, then there's, you know, $100 billion that goes in someone's pocket. Well, you know, the truth's somewhere in the middle. Well, if they get a day out of that, there's another $100 billion. At some point, we've got to stop stalling and get off our butts and take care of it. So.
That is true. So what results or outcomes of the work that you've done, what's been most meaningful to each of you?
One of the things, I was the first girl to take auto mechanics at Pulaski County High School, and to this day, I am so stinking proud of that.
And again, it's opened the door for women everywhere. So that was exciting. Having a child as a single parent and raising that child, to me, is one of the most difficult things that one can do. I have always felt like I had to try twice as hard to get half as far. I struggled a lot, and so I worked 2 jobs the whole time I was in school at Tech, and didn't sleep one or 2 nights a week, didn't even go to bed. And then when I went to Cal State Long Beach, I also worked 2 jobs and paid my way through school. And I'm really, really proud of that. And I'm very, very proud of just the impact that I've made in students' lives, and interns' lives, and families' lives, in the healthcare system. I think it's okay to be proud of ourselves.
So, I think for me, it's interesting because, we've got these recycling facilities all over the planet and so on, and I think that's fairly meaningful, but actually, for me, the 2 things that I believe are the most meaningful in terms of what I've been involved in and helped create, one of them is Blue Mountain School, which is this school which is teaching kids, among other things, it's nature-based learning. In other words, they have to get out into nature daily and learn something about it, so this is very important for kids. And of course, another huge part, which is, I think, tremendously important, is conflict resolution. And then the last one, of course, there also is becoming aware of self, which most people aren't. So that's one aspect. And then the other thing is, I also then a little bit later, after having done a huge amount of activism on all kinds of behalves, I realized that what we need to do is actually change humanity, change the way humans are with each other. And so that's when I created the little community retreat center called Anahata Education Center. You guys can look it up if you want. It's anahataeducationcenter.org. And what it's about is actually teaching people to become aware of what I call their ancestral wounding, and then learning how to self-heal. In other words, most people can't afford to go to therapy as much as they actually need to. And so it's a good idea to learn how to become aware of what's going on inside of yourself and learn how to connect with the source of it and heal it. And we can all do that.
Beautiful. Simple is rewarding for me is the relationships I've formed and the acknowledgement of the distribution teams, the acknowledgement of the farmers who put in such hard work growing food in our community. Oftentimes it's their primary livelihood. They have children they're raising. They have insurance they have to buy on their own. So just a deep, deep appreciation of all the folks in our community that are working to give back and also struggling as they go. The farmers are weather dependent, and their crop depends on what's going on with the weather system, which once again comes into play with our climate circumstances. So most rewarding for me and the people I've gotten to know and have deep, deep friendships with now through the work I've done.
I'm very proud of the people we have helped through both personally and through our businesses in many and various ways. Most of the people that we hired were either in a bad way or out of work when we hired them, and now they're doing very well. We take great pride in trying to pay them and give them the ability to both be proud of their work, but also make a good living so they can support their families doing things that improve the community. So when I look around at the businesses we built, and, you know, we've got a guy who was homeless when he came to us, and we trained him up, and now he's moving into one of our units that we're providing for him. We got another guy who didn't have a car, he couldn't get to work, so he couldn't keep a job. So we solved these problems, and then you look at these people 10 years later, and you're just like, you're not the same person. It's amazing what people will do if you give them just a little bit of help and some consideration and an environment that supports them. And then I'm also proud when we go down and certain areas and we see the buildings that we've done and the businesses that are in them that have made the communities a better place. So, you know, when I sit at Price's Fork in a building that was sitting there vacant and someone comes up to me and says, we really like this home brewery at Moon Hollow, if you haven't been there, Hannah makes the best beer. But, you know, now they can, without having to leave their community, the people at Price's Fork can get a meal. They can have a homegrown, you know, homemade craft beer. The people on the main street of Radford can go sit somewhere nice and have a cup of coffee and a nice sandwich. You know, these are just some small examples of when you walk by, and then watching how the people who helped us build them also can feel pride of that it's kind of special. So, those are some things.
It's awesome. So, what one thing would you tell someone who wanted to follow in your footsteps? I know you've offered some lessons to the people in the audience, but wrap it all up for us.
Just
Recognize and use your power.
I don't think I can keep it to one. But just really know that you can do whatever you really want to do. If you pay attention, focus on it, notice when you are having internal problems and learn how to deal with those. But mostly have a vision about what really inspires you, and then pursue it and be as persevering as it takes, which sometimes is a huge amount, to get to the place that you want to go to. You just have to be resilient, and you have to be persevering.
And also, personally, for a dedication to my goal, if I just showed up at the farmer's market once every 3 Saturdays or something, and somebody wanted to bring in those cucumbers that week and couldn't find me, well, they're gonna give up and never come back and think, well, I can't count on her. So a dedication to our program. I made sure that we have volunteers lined up, that we know what we're doing, we've got the supplies we need to interact with the public, and also, once again, the importance of relationships and listening to other people's stories and learning from them.
I have 6. But I'm going to condense them. So you can be a successful business person and really good for fostering sustainability at the same time. You don't have to choose. Just be good enough that you can do what you do and create enough excess and have the community mindedness to understand that if you do well, but the world fails, you fail. Okay, so define your definition of what a success is to a higher level and not a lower level. It is not to maximize your own possible gain at every possible transaction. That's what economics teaches. It's false. Okay? Raise your eyes, raise your goals to your higher self and be better. You can be a very successful business person and still help with the issues that we're facing today. So that's my number 1 thing. My number 2 thing, I'm not going to go through all 6, is be fearless, be relentless, and be determined.
Wait,
That's just 2. No.
please do, we have 5 minutes, so
Okay.
on with you.
So I've already said this once, do what you can where you can, let your interests guide you. There is plenty of room for everybody. And find the people who are doing what you care about and learn from them. Business can be the greatest engine for sustainability and change. The economy is a subset of the ecology and always will be. It's only for the short term that we've managed to create this place where people say, well, we can't do that because it's not economically feasible. Okay, that's a short bubble that is created by the fact that this earth we're given is so abundant in resources that there was excess to burn through. We've used up our margin. So every good business in the future has got to be one that either goes through and goes cradle to cradle, where you take the product, but we can no longer use things and throw them away. So, and I think that's enough for now. Oh, I've got one more. Don't let the ideal get in the way of the good. I always see, okay, so we have to pass this legislation that's going to help us with climate change. I'll just give a couple of examples, not that I'm not sympathetic. There are a lot of people trying to push down the price of gas right now. Do you know that having a high gas price is probably the single greatest thing for the environment that could happen to us? And yet everybody is screaming to lower it. Why don't we find ways to help people get done what they need to do in a more efficient manner? Because having a high price of gas will create thousands of individual decisions that are actually the correct decision for the planet without having to convert someone to the religion of oh, we need to fix climate change. Okay? So, and you can't do everything all at once. So we need to fix climate change and we need to fix social justice, but not every climate change thing needs to get the social justice right before you enact it. There are things that we can do to move forward one step at a time. So that's probably enough.
Anybody else have
Too much.
any major ones you want to add? I didn't mean to limit everybody to one.
And then you need to do
Yeah,
this.
Thank you. You said a lot of things that I was going to say. I say you said a lot of things that I was going to say. So that's good.
Sorry.
No, it's good.
Well, great. This has been absolutely remarkable to have this group of people together. Such a nice set of folks complimenting one another. And I'm very grateful to all of you for giving us your time tonight. So, folks, please help me thank them for being here. And I hope you'll maybe let folks come up and say hello if they have additional questions for you. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and please visit mosaicforearth.org if you have any questions about subsequent events. Thank you.